The 2023 San Diego Padres are perhaps going to be best remembered for being the laughingstock disappointment in all of baseball, along with the New York Mets. And perhaps in response to that, we've got some rumors circulating that they are aggressively pursuing an extension with Juan Soto. But the question is, should they be? That's right, we're going to be talking about that, as well as overall organizational ineptitude with this team. And giving credence to that is the rumors that they may be bringing on Ryan Flaherty to replace Bob Melvin. Oh yeah, we got a lot to talk about today, so let's get on into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, August 15th. As always, I am your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow my baseball-related writing work over at justbaseball.com, or more often, you can see me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, or if you don't want my sometimes more entertainment-focused tweets, personal tweets, you can check out at LO_Padres, where it's all Padres all the time, even sometimes some funny tweets on there too, like asking you guys how you cope with the losses of this season, all sorts of stuff. So go check that out. Also, go check out the podcast on SiriusXM. Just type us in there and you will find us pop up in the SiriusXM app. So be sure to do that as well. And once again, thank you for making us your first listen every day, free and available on all platforms, of course, including Sirius. Today's episode, guys, we got a little bit of a special treat. We're not going to be doing the old usual game recap. I think we're going to save that for tomorrow's episode, or maybe even Thursday's episode. At the time of this recording, the Padres, Yu Darvish just gave up kind of a bases clearing, double or whatever it was. I forgot what it was exactly, but we're going to be recapping more of that later. I want to dive more into Yu Darvish especially, actually. I think it's time to give a little bit of a overall look at him, especially considering his future. But that's what I want to look at today, is future. I want to look at the team as a whole. I don't want to just do some game recaps. That's a little bit sometimes easy to do. Instead, I want to react to some rumors and some reports that have come out from USA Today. Mr. Bob Nightingale. We're going to be talking about Soto. We're going to be talking about organizational stuff. So let's dive into it. If you listened to yesterday's podcast, I alluded to this at the end. It actually broke live while I was recording that according to Bob Nightingale of USA Today, the Padres are aggressively trying to sign Juan Soto to a contract extension. And now quoting directly from his piece, just as they have all season, before having to make a decision this winter whether they keep him or risk losing him as a free agent after 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, get your helmets on, get your safety goggles or whatever on. It's time for a take. And it's the title of today's episode for a reason. I actually think that this news gives a lot of credence to the fact that the Padres really are just dysfunctional in every way. And look, I want to completely, and I know this is almost a little bit unfair, but completely ignore Juan Soto, the player, for a second. Juan Soto, the player, is excellent. He's a top F4 player. He is a guy that walks more than he strikes out. He's excellent. Even with the bad defense, or at least mediocre defense at best, he's still such an excellent player at the plate that it kind of almost seemingly doesn't even matter. Right? Like, he's been so good for so long. He's a potential MVP candidate. Actually, if you look at him right now, he's 13th in F4 on Fangraphs right now. He's great. He's absolutely great. Ha-Seong Kim, for fun fact, is actually ahead of him, especially because of the defense. But he's great. I have no issue with the Padres in a vacuum wanting to extend Juan Soto. I think it's great. I think it's what they should have done this offseason. But now let's get into the dysfunction. I think that it's so weird that the Padres, in response to a lack of depth, which I feel like is one thing that's happened this year. And granted, don't get me wrong, I think that Preller is to blame for a lot of this. Almost like 80% of it, I think, should go on him. But I also think that guys haven't shown up this year. No one told Xander Bogaerts to become a 103, like a 103 WRC plus player instead of the career like 130 that he is, right? Like, no one told him to do that. No one told Manny Machado to stink for 3 months, right? No one told the Padres to be only better than the Oakland A's with driving runners in. Yeah, Xander Bogaerts 109 WRC plus. His career is looking like it is 117. And then every year before then, 134, 130, 129, 141, 133. So the career numbers are a little bit off because his early days with the team, when he didn't quite fully reach his potential, like drag it a little bit, particularly 2017, when he also just had an off year in a lot of ways. So, he's not responsible for that. Like, again, I think that there is some leniency that should be given because this team is just historically, or at least in terms of this year, like pretty remarkably unclutch in basically every scenario, from bullpen to offense, right? Like every which way, this team has just found ways to lose, right? So part of me is like, I don't know how much you should be putting on AJ Preller, but at the same time, this team is going to have Fernando Tatis Jr. on the books for a while. And again, none of these deals do I have a problem with in a vacuum, including Xander Bogaerts. But Xander Bogaerts is an 11-year deal. Manny Machado is extended forever. He's going to be retiring a Padre. Tatis is 14. Yu Darvish is extended until he's in his 40s. Jake Cronenworth got a 7-year extension. At what point do we start saying we can't just keep locking into a roster that hasn't done all that much? Now, don't get me wrong. They were great last year. They made it to the NLCS. They hit big. And last year, they had really clutch performances. Ha-Seong Kim evolved into being an average bat, right? Jorge Alfaro had like 8-game winners. 5, I think it was, to be exact. And it was like the most of any Padre in like 20 years or something crazy like that, right? Like they were a clutch team considering the lack of offensive firepower, right? Like considering that they didn't have all that much last year, they did a lot. They did a lot better, at least, than this year. And it's pretty remarkable because a lot of the players that were good for the Padres last year have been better this year. So Kim is one of them. Not Yu Darvish. Blake Snell is one of them. Joe Musgrove, while he was pitching, was one of them. Josh Hader is one of them. Right? Like they've had a lot of players actually be a little bit better this year. So it hasn't been all down bad. Like there are some guys that got better this year, but the bottom line is I just think that extending Soto, considering that what we've seen this year is that, especially following the deadline, where look at the Dodgers, they bring in Ahmed Rosario, they bring in, if you count the offseason, they bring in JD Martinez, they bring in Jason Hayward, they bring in just a bunch of random guys, they bring in Lance Lynn, and those guys end up being a lot better than any of the Padres trade deadline acquisitions, and better than some of the Padres players that they extended this year in general, right? So I don't understand how you can see what's going on in the league right now, particularly in our division, and say what we need to do is do the same thing that we've been doing, which is once again rely on superstar power and just kind of just keep the roster intact. There is no flexibility on this team right now. And if you extend Soto for what's likely going to be like a decade-long contract, and don't get me wrong, I would love to extend a player of Soto's talents, that's just another player that you're going to have stuck there, and you have this bloated roster, and at some point, it's just hard for me to believe that Seidler and company are just going to be like, yeah, we're just going to keep doing this forever. Like, how does that impact international signing money? How does that impact, draft pick stuff? How is that going to impact, what's it called? Just the middle of the road free agents, right? Like, are you going to be able to sign guys who might just be good for a year or two, or might just be okay? Your middling free agents, right? And those guys do have value, especially because they provide some depth without the cost and without the commitment, I think is the big thing of some of these big free agents. You need the big free agents for sure. Again, I've said this many times on my podcast. I do not like it when people love praising your Orioles, your Rays, your Guardians, your Brewers for having those nice good seasons and then they sell, right? Or in some cases, the Yankees. Everyone go check out that CBS Sports article where like one game away from the World Series and then they cut back on payroll, right? Like those teams deserve a lot of crap too. But I just don't, this just reeks of desperation to me. This reeks of, we don't know how to develop anybody, so we need to extend the talent that we have, even if it's going to cripple us. And the last point that I want to mention in regards to having so much money being spent is the most important. And that leads into our next point, which is organizational ineptitude. What about spending money on staff and trainers, the athletic department, medical staff, analytics department, scouts, equipment? Maybe I can't speak for everything directly. I'm not exactly an in the know sort of analyst or anything like that. Like I'm not around the team and how the facilities work, but that's another part of this. Giving a lot of money to talent, but not necessarily the stuff to make the talent flourish. We're going to talk about that, guys, in just a second. But before we do that, I got to talk to you about a great thing. It's called Ibotta. First of all, I mean, that name is just dynamite. But look, you ever picking up your hot dogs or your burgers or whatever? Because, you know, it's summer, it's August. People tend to vacation in August and whatnot. You know you're already doing it, though. So why not get rewarded for it? That's the best thing in life, man, is getting rewarded for things that you were already going to do anyway. Ibotta helps you out with that, folks. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. That's right. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's just that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year. That could be the cost of an entire shopping trip. It just helps you out. Or you could use your cash back to buy that flight you've been eyeing, or that game. You know, maybe you want to go to another Padres game. Who, you know, that they might want you because their sellout streak ended the other day because of how the team's likely been playing. But you can go to a Padres game, do all that sort of stuff. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. It's really cool. Really cool, guys. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. So now, I have a question for you guys. I mean, I'm not even a question. I have a request, because this is helping you. Go check it out right now. Ibotta is offering our Locked On Padres listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code MLB when you register. I gotta fix my contacts. Wow. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code MLB. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code MLB. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Locked On Padres podcast. We're feeling good. We're feeling great. Not really, though. I'm lying, because I am sad talking about this team. And I am sad being this Grinch type of person who is logging on here, talking into a camera, talking about why I do not want them to extend Juan Soto. Look, if they did extend Juan Soto, I would be like, wow, that's cool. Like, this guy's going to be a Padre forever, and he's really, really good. So that's awesome. But it would also be a reflection of, like, this is a bad team. And then for them to just kind of double down on the same strategy is really rough. Something that I talked about in yesterday's show is that, and I've been saying this all year, there needs to be investigation into why every single player that comes to the Padres gets worse or stays the same. Oh, well, what about Tatis? Okay, he was a prospect, whatever. What about Ha-Seong? Okay. What about Gary? Yeah, Gary's one of the exceptions. It's actually incredible that he's like the waiver wire pickup of the year. And then Joe Musgrove. Other than that, though, and I'm going to go back to 2020 when the Padres were going for it, and they, or at least were, you know, they wanted to make a deep run. Maybe not necessarily a World Series run was expected, but they go and get Mitch Moreland of the Red Sox. Was it possible that he should have been expected to get worse because he had never really done what he'd been doing before with the Padres? Sure. But that's still an indictment on the front office for getting a guy that you should have known was going to get worse. Same thing goes for someone like Adam Frazier. You bring him in, and he goes from being an all-star second baseman in 2021 to being a guy who hit, I'm going to look this up actually if I can, with the Padres. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. With the Padres being like a 240 hitter with like a 310 on base, which is what he always was. So, okay, again, maybe he's just a guy that they mistakenly bought in on. But if I even, the man of question, Juan Soto, even Juan Soto, when he first got to the Padres, had a bit of a decline. And I brought up those guys on the Dodgers earlier, just saying, and I know that the Dodgers are like the cream of the crop, right? Where it's like, it's kind of like when you compare a superhero movie to Spider-Verse, and it's like, okay, guys, yeah, I know that this one isn't as good as Spider-Verse and Across the Spiders, right? But like, that's the top dog. Like, that might be a little bit unfair. That's true, but this is not just the Dodgers that do this. The one thing that is only happening with the Padres, right, is that they're the only team that I can see where it's just always guys getting worse. No one gets better. And that seems to be a theme. You could even bring up the Mets, the other team that's been disappointing this year, where guys seem to join that team and only get worse, right? It just doesn't work their way, right? At least most of the time. But with the Padres, like Jake Marisnick, all these guys, you bring Xander Bogaerts gets signed, and he's having the worst season of his career in a long time, right? So it's really rough. And like I said, with the Padres, yeah, he went from being a 324, 388, 488 guy, or 448 guy, to a 267, 327, 335 slash line guy. Should have been expected, sure, but I'm just saying, like, this stuff starts to add up and it goes to the front office. And my thing is, I don't think it's only just, wow, they keep getting really unlucky with the players they acquire. Why do these guys just hate playing here? Is it a ballpark thing? A little bit, yeah. I mean, maybe you could argue that there are some guys who hit less home runs with the Padres because Petco is a little bit more of a pitcher-friendly park. But WRC Plus accounts for that, and if you look at that stuff, guys get worse. I already mentioned Bogaerts, and that's just one. You need to start looking at the front office and the organization as a whole. And I just don't understand, like, you need to be spending money on the talent, but they need to be spending money on staff. The San Francisco Giants have plenty of staff. Right? They've got all these pitching coaches. You can read articles on how they're like a whole unit. They're specialists. They spend money on their staff, while entry-level positions for the Padres seemingly don't have that same level. And as a result, you're just paying this superstar talent that is definitely superstar talent. Bogaerts is a great player. I'm not out on the guy. I just refuse to believe that this is just who he is for the rest of his career. That would be insane. And quite frankly, frustrating as all heck. But, like, you need to be spending more on staff. We're really going to be in a position where we're going to blame the 3-time, like, manager of the year who just took us to the NLCS and just after a year inexplicably doesn't know how to manage anymore? Come on, guys. Like, could you imagine if this is a really strong comparison, but, like, if Sean McVay, I know I'm bringing an LA team, but he'd me out. They won a Super Bowl not too long ago, so they're relevant. Like, if Sean McVay last year, everyone was like, wow, they need to fire him. That would be crazy, right? You wouldn't have that. And I know Melvin has issues, but I just think that this blaming of Melvin is weird. And it's ignoring the real problem, which is the front office, in my opinion. And again, I said at the top of the episode, it's not necessarily Preller's fault that Machado stunk for 3 months, Bogaerts is having his worst year, and that they can't drive in a run to save their lives. I get that. But I would understand if someone says he should be blamed for that. Right? Because do they have the staff to be able to help these guys hit in better situations? You know, situational hitting? Do they have the right staff to be able to help guys, you know, figure out some kinks in their swing, help manage their injuries, maybe like, you know, Xander Bogaerts' wrist issue? I'm just speculating right now about specifics, but the general vibe stays the same. And the general vibe is that this team, it shows their ineptitude. They can't develop hitters, so they have to extend every single one that looks like they might be okay. Right? Like, so they go out and sign Bogaerts, not a middling free agent for just a couple of years. They go and only get the shiny giant object. Right? And then they go, oh, well, let's trade for Adam Frazier. He's hitting great right now. Mitch Moreland, he's hitting great right now. There's never any guys that they bring up. Matthew Batten, you know, any sort of guys on this team. Brandon Dixon is another one, right? Like, they just don't have guys that get called up and can do well for this team the same way the Dodgers do it, the same way any team does it, same way the Rays do it, the same way the Guardians do it sometimes, the same way that the Brewers do it, the same way that the damn Minnesota Twins do it better than us, right? Like, I just don't. Sal Frelick is like hitting cleanup for the Twins right now, and it sometimes works. I just think that this would be such a indictment on the Padres, and it's so weird for them to aggressively be pursuing it now. I mean, there's conflicting reports, I get it, but it's just weird to me that you spent all that money in the offseason on all these guys, except Soto, who's the young one. If you're going to keep a bunch of players for decades, okay, I mean, if you told me heading into the season, it's like, all right, yeah, they extended, you know, Musgrove last year and et cetera, and then they have Tatis and Soto on the books for a bajillion for 10 years, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense, though, because those guys are young. And it's like, okay, and then those are going to be our two pillars, and we'll build around them. But instead, they're just taking everything that might be decent. They extend Darvish, right? And Darvish hasn't been very good this year. We're going to talk about him more later in the week. And then you extend Jake Cronenworth, an average player, to potentially being an above average player. They settle on everything that looks okay, almost as if they're afraid that the longer that player stays with them, that they're just going to explode. But then in that case, why are you extending them then? I'm talking my head in circles right now. But I think that fundamentally, this is what the Padres need to do. I'm just saying that if you look at their overall history ever since AJ Preller got here, it's the same thing over and over. And it's frustrating. And I don't understand just why this keeps happening. I mean, I do understand why it keeps happening. It's because of the front office. I just don't understand why that isn't the area that we're addressing. And by all accounts, it sounds like there's not going to be a change there. If you read from The Athletic for Dennis Lin, someone asked Joshua G. in his mailbag saying, if the Padres don't make the playoffs, do you expect Preller and Bob Melvin to return next season? And here's what Dennis Lin said. Seidler's continued belief in Preller, who is under contract through the 2026 season, would seem to make a GM change unlikely, even if the Padres miss the playoffs. If they fail to qualify for the 2024 postseason, it could become a different story. Melvin, meanwhile, appears to be on shakier ground. He's under contract only through next year. There's been no sign of extension talks, and if the Padres don't sneak into the playoffs, it's hard to imagine someone in a prominent role won't be made to take the fall for what would be an even bigger disappointment than 2021. The optics of making Melvin a scapegoat would be rough. Preller, who is known to be an especially hands-on GM when it comes to instruction at both the major and minor league levels, which I've been attesting to myself over the course of this podcast, has already fired and hired 3 full-time managers and cycled through more than 30 coaches. Allowing a GM to hire a 4th manager would be relatively unprecedented, and Melvin, a 3-time manager of the year, remains widely respected in the clubhouse and throughout the industry. If the Padres opt to move on before his contract ends, and Preller retains his present level of authority, there would be significant questions as to whether San Diego could attract a suitable replacement, much less an actual upgrade. And guess what? We have rumors about who the potential upgrade / change, whatever you want to call it, could be. We're going to talk about that guy in just a second, guys. But before we do that, let me talk to you guys about a classic sponsor of this show. It's FanDuel, man. You guys know what it's all about. And before we're a baseball podcast, don't get me wrong, but football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. That's right. Even if you blow, your fantasy football draft, right? You stink there, FanDuel's got you covered, guys. Right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Oh, yes, that's right. So you could just feel good all season long and feel good about your pick. You could feel good after week 1. You could say, hey, the Seahawks, I got them to win the Super Bowl. And after week 1, you could be like, I was right. You know what I mean? You could do that stuff, whatever. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Take some time to visit FanDuel and, just check out things as well, guys. They're really great. Do that. Go check it out. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Remember to go check us out on the SiriusXM app. Would greatly appreciate that. Just type it in on the app and you'll find Locked On Padres. It's really great. We're winding down this show and we're continuing my rant about the Padres organization as a whole and what they seem to be doing wrong. I keep telling you, look, the Juan Soto extension, he's a great player. I didn't spend any of this podcast almost talking about him as a player because I don't think that that's the question. I genuinely don't think that's the question. He's too young for me to worry about back end of the years of the contract. That's not it. It's just locking yourself in, giving little wiggle room to move scares me. And don't get me wrong, if they hadn't done some of those contracts beforehand, then that'd be different, right? Like if they hadn't extended Cronenworth, given the Bogarts contract, extended Manny, I'd be all over this, including, by the way, if those players hadn't done well. Like let's say everything's the same except that they didn't extend all the players they did, then I think I'd be more bullish on them extending Soto and just saying, all right, we'll figure out the rest later. If Machado leaves, okay, we'll figure it out. Go get Matt Chapman for less, right? Like something like that. That's what I genuinely would have said that. You go look at my episodes. I thought that with Machado as well. I thought that wasn't a must do thing for them. But here's the next line of business. There is another rumor that Mr. Bob Nightingale reported over at USA Today, and it is worth taking this with a grain of salt because it's Bob Nightingale, who is a bit of a meme for those who are unaware in the sports reporting world. It just seems like and I have literally heard some stories myself that I can't talk about on the podcast about like a lot of people being like, what is going on? Where did this guy get this from? This is totally untrue. Like he's a meme for a reason. I enjoy his ridiculous tweets and how he always gets them wrong, but whatever. So take this all with a grain of salt, but there is at least some feasibility with it, considering we're talking about Preller, a guy who I think has made a lot of bad decisions, or at least seems to be the one that we need to be blaming for a lot of this if we're expected to see some real systemic, cultural change for the Padres. Ryan Flaherty. If the Padres don't reach the postseason, says Bob Nightingale in his article, Bob Melvin could take the fall with bench coach Ryan Flaherty a strong candidate to succeed him. I could go into a whole soliloquy, wax poetic, rant, rabble, whatever word you want to use, about certain people continually, not just in life, but in this case sports, finding ways to fail upwards that might be a little bit, I don't know, what's the word? Incendiary, I think, in a lot of ways. I'm not going to go down that route. I will say, though, that fundamentally, it is never a good sign, in my personal experience, when guys who haven't really done anything are getting promoted for some reason with your sports team, especially if that's allegedly a great sports team. I just don't think you see that. I go in football. I don't see that happen with the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? I don't see that happening with some other teams, right? I don't see teams where guys that don't do anything get promoted, or at least guys who are maybe they're neutral, right? Like maybe they're bad, sometimes good, sometimes bad. I don't understand what Ryan Flaherty, and I'm not trying to be mean to the guy who used to play with the Orioles once upon a time. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm really not. Based on just results and the fact that I've been talking a lot about how the Padres just don't seem to get the best out of their talent, I don't understand how the bench coach who's been part of all this, who has overseen this, is being the one considered to fill in the shoes for Bob Melvin, who's a 3-time manager of the year. That, to me, speaks to Preller going back to his very, what's the word, the hands-on approach and just not giving it to someone else. Going in-house again, and Jace Tingler was a little bit of Texas days, right? All that stuff. I don't like that. I don't like this news at all. I'm not saying that I know Ryan Flaherty would be a bad coach. That's not what these conversations are about. It gets me very frustrated when, say, you have Eric Bieniemy with the Chiefs, or you have, all sorts of teams when they're, who says he can't do good? Maybe give him a try. That's not what we're saying. We're just talking about the opportunity and the overall look about why is this guy getting a shot, though, over Melvin, who has so much more experience and is praised throughout the whole league. The whole league. And you're going to replace him with this guy, Flaherty? Why are you doing that? Well, the first thing that you point to is to appease Manny Machado. Star. He's a star pleaser. He wants Manny Machado to be happy. Totally get that. However, I do want to note that Manny Machado is a big reason for why this team was pretty unsuccessful this year. Okay, sorry, we're not done yet, I know, but you guys get my point. I know they could still technically make the playoffs, but whatever. And Machado stunk for 3 months, and that's the guy you want to please right now because he's his boy back from his Baltimore days. That just doesn't sit well with me. I mean, they gave Machado the extension. As far as I'm concerned, at that point, it's like, hey, they did goodbye you. You know what I mean? You shouldn't be owing him more than that necessarily, aside from just decency and trying to still field a better team. That much you owe. But to do this type of stuff where you're replacing a manager that everyone likes and has such a high pedigree with a guy who hasn't really shown that things have gotten better under him, right? I don't get that. And I really, really don't like it. And I just think that this is just, I know it's Nightingale, but I could see Preller doing this. I really could. I could see him doing anything, especially because GMs, across every sport all the time, they'll fire the manager before they get fired, and then maybe they get fired the next year. But it's a scapegoat thing, as Dennis Lin mentioned in his article. Why? That's just the question. My response to that is just why. This feels like the armchair experts, Padres fans, and not even necessarily Pirates, but just fans in general, online yelling about someone needs to go. And then you're like, okay, fine, we'll bring in Flair. I just don't like that. I think that if you're going to fire a coach, make sure you have someone awesome to replace him. He's with the Rangers right now, but let's say Bruce Bochy was available. And you're like, all right, instead of Melvin, bring in Bochy. It's just an example. I know he's with the Rangers. But, that's different because it's like, oh, you didn't. It's like when I remember, this is a weird analogy, but it's like in fantasy sports, when people ask you, should I drop this guy? Can I drop this guy? It's like, well, who's available? That's what you got to look into first. You shouldn't just drop to drop. In that case, you might as well keep him. You drafted him for for the reason in the first place. You hired Melvin for a reason in the first place, and they made the NLCS last year. So, again, I just don't think that this is good. I think that overall the Padres really need to do some soul searching, and they need to look within themselves and start looking at, we need to develop more of the organization. We need to look at how the reason we're losing to the Dodgers, at least in terms of the regular season, that's right, still going to make fun of the Dodgers in the postseason. I refuse to stop that. That they keep outdueling us, and that they turn players who might have had something into something. They make them better. Lance Lynn, high ERA, but good strikeout stuff. They got rid of the ERA part. Jason Hayward, solid defender who just couldn't hit the... he had a good swing. He's been a top-level prospect before. Well, they figured that out, and they got rid of all the inconsistency. Joe Kelly, they eliminate some of the... Joe Kelly, my arch nemesis. They eliminate some of his wild pitch issues, and he becomes a sharp reliever and whatnot for them. Ahmed Rosario, just a defensive, platoon specialist. They changed him. These are just some examples. JD Martinez, et cetera, et cetera. Heck, the only one that I've seen the Dodgers unable to fix and it bite them in the butt is Cody Bellinger seemingly. So shouts to him. He's the only one that left LA and got better. You know what I mean? Like, he's the only one I could think of that literally got better after leaving the Dodgers for some reason. Like, they just couldn't fix him, and then another team did. So he's an exception, though. For the most part, it usually goes their way, and that's why they're always competitive. And I will say that the one thing that I think Preller in the front office did do good by was the deadline. I like that they didn't go all in on this season, which is probably going to be a no playoff season. I like that they said, we'll go after Choi, Garrett Cooper, who hit his first home run as a Padre, which was cool last night. I like that because there's not too much of a commitment. But I don't want to be going all in on the present when the present hasn't seeded all that many the fruits of labor, I guess. It just hasn't been all that great. So, again, I really do think that overall, the Juan Soto and Ryan Flaherty news really shows you how much this team, and AJ Preller in particular, just I don't think they know exactly. It's just not. It's not well thought out. It's not well planned. It's not meticulous enough. What are you doing? Do we really want Cronenworth, Darvish? Darvish, Musgrove, Suarez is on the books for a lot of money. You've got, if I said Cronenworth already, Machado, Tatis, Bogarts. Who else, man? At one point, do we look at this and say, maybe we shouldn't try extending every player immediately because we need to develop some talent? Put more investment in there. I just wonder if Seidler likes Preller so much that he's just not going to do that. I don't know. If they extend Juan Soto, I will be a little disappointed, only because I think that it shows an epidemic of this Padres team and an unwillingness to acknowledge that you can't just keep signing superstars over and over. You need to build some depth, build some farm, hire some better coaches. I won't be livid. I really think I'm going to be livid if Ryan Flaherty takes over for Bob Melvin. I'm going to be pretty upset if Bob Melvin is let go anyway. But if it's Flaherty, that to me speaks to I just need someone to blame. And if that's the situation, number one, Preller should be ashamed. And number two, Seidler shouldn't be allowing a situation in which a GM is in a position where they're like, screw it, whatever helps us. Or I'm sorry, screw it, I don't care about the future. I'm just trying to save my butt. That type of thing. It happens in basketball sometimes when like a team is on the bubble, the coach is probably going to get fired, so then they trade all of their draft picks of the future for someone right now because they're like, what do I care? I'm going to get fired if this doesn't work anyway. It's somewhat similar in a vein to that. Somewhat similar. So that's my reaction to that. Would I be livid about Soto? No. I just think that it really does show you the problem with where the Padres are right now. I think it's pretty rough. Pretty rough. And this team, the loser energy is insane. I bet you, I mean, I don't know. It's like the seventh inning it looks like right now while I'm recording. They're going to end the game, right, with like a grounded double play by like Bogarts or something, right? Like they're a mess. And you want to see what happened this year and just extend everybody again? I don't like it. I don't like it. But we're going to be talking about that more and more as the season goes on and as the season comes to an end. Probably going to come back to this topic again because, I mean, it's Juan Soto getting a potential extension, so we'll see. But until then, guys, thank you for listening. On tomorrow's episode, probably going to recap the first two games of this Orioles series. So you guys have that to look forward to. Hopefully, maybe the Padres made a comeback in this game. I don't know if they did. We'll see. Hopefully they don't hit into any double plays like I mentioned, or have any disastrous errors or whatever. We'll see how that goes. Going to be doing my podcast crossover with Miller Thomas as well. And if you're curious, you can find me on Twitter again at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. I just saw Blue Beetle the other day. If you want some movie analysis stuff, that review is going up on Nerdist.com. If you've heard of that website before, that should be out on Wednesday, so that's kind of cool. And I'm going to be writing about Ha-Seong Kim this week as well for Just Baseball, so some cool writings coming from me this week. If you hate my voice and my look, both of which I would totally understand. But until next time, everybody, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.